Hello everyone, my name is Abby Lass and welcome to Controversy Mondays. I'm joined here with Gethin Binns, Sam Agranovich, and Christian Goeselt. They are all juniors, and the topic we're going to be debating today, which topics are more important to emphasize in order to create a successful society. The options are either the humanities or quantitative analysis in the terms of science and math. Christian, would you like to start?
Yes, well thank you, Abby. I think that humanities are by far the best subjects, and to be honest, I don't even see the need for math and science at all. To a certain extent. Let me explain something. So, my dad's a history teacher at Newton North. He didn't take a single math class in college. He's doing fine, right? Now, let me give you another example. In my experience, science is not something you use in everyday life for the people, regarding the adults that I know around me. My dad's understanding of math is at a middle school level, and that's fine. But humanities expand your interest in the world, interest in other countries. I include languages in my definition of humanities, and you get to learn about things like ethics, morality, literature, and how to understand the world around you. And that sort of conceptual thinking is so much more important than whether you can crunch numbers, which you can do with a calculator, or type in, I use Wolfram Alpha for some complex problems. And there will always be people interested in science. There might not always be philosophers in the world. There will always be scientists, but there might not always be philosophers. So I think that's by far the most important thing.
I would like to zoom out and not define it to simply math and science and go back to the original definition, which was quantitative analysis. And when discussing which is more important for society, I'd say quantitative analysis is of course more important, because if you go back in time, the objective empirical study of how to get the most food and how to survive and how to develop civilization as a whole, which would allow sedentary societies to rise, which would allow people to become philosophers and not work a day except talk some fancy whatever, it can only exist on top of the work of quantitative analysis, on top of the hard work of establishing a society and establishing an amount of farming and crop rotation and the basic tools of all of human civilization, which has gotten us to this point that allows us to record this, aren't specifically math and science on a personal level, but empiricism, objectivity, the ability to analyze the world around you in a quantitative sense is exactly the most important for society to exist. And you talked about how people always want to be scientists. I don't understand why you would make that assertion. People would also, I could say, always want to be philosophers in the exact same way, with no evidence at all. I don't think the issue is people wanting to be something. I think the issue is when you define which is more important for the existence of a society, I would say it's quantitative analysis.
So are you saying so much that sciences are more important than humanities?
I would be saying that yes, sciences and the ability to analyze the world around you and to use it and develop it to increase humanity's output and increase humanity's well-being is objectively more important.
Well, okay, if we're going to look at objective sort of facts here, then we're going to... by the way, I'm Gethin Binns. If we're going to look at objective facts, which my good friend Sam failed to mention, if we're going to look at facts, then we're going to look at the fact that you see a greater amount of sociopaths and psychopaths are going to be in scientific fields than they are in the humanities. What does this suggest? This suggests that at the end of the day...
Are you trying to say something negative about sociopaths?
To be fair, though, also, there are a lot of sociopaths and psychopaths that are clergymen.
There are.
So.
Hey. Remember, sociopathy
I would argue that that's for an entirely different reason, which is that they're engaging in dogma as opposed to rigor and, intellectual rigor and sort of expanding one's intellectual horizons, which is what Christian's talking about. But I'd also remind Sam that the only reason that we have empirical thought today is as a result of a little thing called, the Enlightenment that occurred after the Renaissance, which was entirely built out of the humanities, and indeed sort of that kind of thinking. And as a result, the sciences that, as we know them today, indeed the fact that we are recording this right now, would not be possible if it wasn't for the Industrial Revolution that came as a result of intellectual advances made in the Enlightenment.
Well, I just want to say that the world is not black and white. It's very, very gray. And science can solve black and white problems, but science cannot solve everything. And I have a little tradition of, so I consider myself a pretty religious person. So about once a month, I bike down to the church that I go to, and I just sit down for an hour with my priest for an hour, and we just talk about moral issues over tea and biscuits.
Very civilized.
Yes, very civilized. He's a big Churchill fan. Anyway, but we sit down and we talk about moral issues, and we talk about issues like that. And I feel like science and math, they have their place, and they need to be learned, but I feel like they fit into the broader category of humanities as a way people can apply it, but then take that knowledge and apply ethics, apply their beliefs, and apply their broader understanding of the people around them to a greater understanding of the world. A great example is China. In China, Americans don't understand China. They really don't. The culture is so different. And science isn't going to tell you anything about that. But if you go there and you experience the culture, and experience the people, and you learn the language of those 1.6 billion people, you become a greater person, and you actually benefit society as a whole. And that's something math and science can't do.
I would like to answer multiple of the assertions made in turn. Firstly, you mentioned how sociopaths are more likely to become scientists.
That was fluff, Sam. That was fluff. I
would
brought
just-
that up
I would
just
just-
to sort of... It was the opening salvo. You don't need to address that.
I would just like to address it. I'm not going to let you have it. People who are
It's something I
sociopaths...
have. It's true.
Listen, sociopathy is not objectively a negative
Yes,
character
it is.
trait. No, it isn't.
Not
Yes, it is.
necessarily.
Really?
Lots of
necessarily.
people live
You, of
very
course, talk as one.
Clearly.
Lots of people live healthy lives as sociopaths, and simply saying that a sociopath is more fit for work in the scientific field, so it makes sense why they might dominate it. And this in no way reflects badly on either the field or them.
Just to be clear, the jobs in which you find most sociopaths and psychopaths, because sociopaths have a more difficult time being employed. Sorry, this is not the point of the argument, but just to be clear, they're lawyers, they're clergymen, they're typically in places where they have power over people. There probably are scientists among that, but the highest ranking ones are not.
I was more trying to draw attention to something that I will now expostulate on, much to Sam's chagrin. Generally speaking, what you find in engineering in STEM fields is that there is a certain line of thinking that is always employed, and something that people I know have a great deal of difficulty with. Is the idea that they very much think in terms of black and white. That's what Christian was bringing up. It's very much they think in terms of the binary and in terms of binary, basically. And if I'm going to sort of feed off of the sociopathic comment, which I really enjoy.
Not all scientists are sociopaths. We acknowledge that.
Most of them are, though. But what is actually true is what you're finding is that in truly unprecedented numbers, what you find is the radicalization of these engineers, of these mathematicians, to radical Islam. It's actually phenomenal. It's bizarre because there's something attractive about this sort of fundamentalism. There's something attractive about the condemnation of the blackness and the whatever you call it. I forget what.
Otherness.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling now. But the point is that it's very important to recognise that you should always sort of maintain a balance there. You need to have your scientists because, of course, again, science is incredibly valuable. But you also need to have that sort of humanitarian aspect that makes people more sort of ethical and less reduces the binary in their thinking.
Let's talk about black and white for a moment. The implication when you mention black and white thinking is that there is a higher gray thinking. But I would say, as we're going back to the topic is which is more useful for society. And I would say gray topics can only arise within a society setting where humanities can arise. Quantitative thinking is the back on which humanities may arise. You speak about how the Renaissance started empiricism, but I would say that the existence of sedentary societies and which allowed the Renaissance to form, which was technological advancements, which allowed people to spend their times as artists and philosophers, can only be ascribed to the fact that people chose these quantitative jobs, these abilities to rationalize and become merchants, trade, link up together the human world. You mentioned how China is so different, but they exist on the same principles that all of human civilizations have arisen, on quantitative thinking, even if their gray issues are slightly different. No, in the same way, they adopted their silkworms from quantitative thinking to make silk, and the reason they did this was because it sold. The direction of their expansion was along the Silk Road, because that's what got them money. The reason why all of these civilizations rolled up through the world wasn't because people were philosophers and thought about the nature of living. It's because people were able to develop strong societies that could last.
But Sam, then my question for you is, the goal here is to see what would create the most successful society. And I know with technological advances, there becomes a question of we can, but should we? And do you think without a question of morality or ethics, do you think science will just continue to advance to a point where it's becoming detrimental to our society because we've ceased to think whether or not we should?
Well, before Sam answers that, I don't want him to play devil's advocate here because I happen to know his opinion. So I'm going to let him talk first, and then I'll provide a riposte. So you don't actually have to betray your moral, Sam.
So this is a quagmire for me. As science develops, it will get awful, in my opinion, and the existence of transhumanism is an existential threat, in my opinion. It's completely...
Can you explain what transhumanism is?
Yeah, it's the belief that as science develops, you'll be able to switch out parts of your body for better parts. You can have better eyes, better brains, better legs, and this belief of constant improvement, I think, will make us intrinsically unhuman, which is bad for society, because once humans don't exist, I believe there will be no society. Now...
It's basically the idea of controlled human evolution. That's basically what you mean.
Now, this might run contrary to my opinion of quantitative analysis giving rise to society, and it is incredibly hypocritical. But I think that humanity is a great check on science developing to the range of us not existing
so you agree
anymore.
With us?
No, just in that one issue. We're talking about what's best for society.
Let's not catch Sam in that quagmire, because he's been very good at recognising it. The riposte is, of course... But isn't it just? Isn't it just our progression? Isn't developing our own characteristics going to allow us to continue to feel to fully explore what it is to be human? If I have a brain that can just simply quantifiably process more data, would that allow me to explore the human experience more than if I had my current brain, which is less than ideal? If I could see more colours of the spectrum, like if everyone had hyperchromia, for example.
Tetrachromacy, you mean?
No, it's hyperchromia. Well, who cares?
Whatever.
You could see more colours.
If everyone could, there's this great Battlestar Galactica speech that Cylon gives, where he's like, I saw a supernova and I could not fully appreciate it because I have eyes that can only see within the visual spectrum, as opposed to in infrared or ultraviolet, and I couldn't see all of those spectrums and I couldn't appreciate it in its full glory. So basically what you're saying is we can't fully appreciate nature, we can't fully appreciate our own human nature merely because of your own moral concerns, which is, in my opinion.
Alright, let's say
I'm gonna flip sides for a bit and say I'm a humanitarian for a bit, I'm for humanities. I would say that humanities is a uniquely human construct simply because our existence is an accident. The fact that we have developed in this cold, harsh world of gradients causing life to form is a complete accident and is meaningless. So developing science up to a point where we can further understand humanities is completely missing the point. I understand visual increasements and physical increasements, but messing with our brain intrinsically messes with the very nature of humanities.
What if your processing speed?
I want to intervene here. So,
yeah.
First of all, I strongly disagree with that point. I believe in creation. I believe we were put here for a purpose. And I believe that that purpose is to love and take care of each other and to build a society that our children will want to live in. I think that without that notion that I just described, you're right. Life is meaningless. And if life is meaningless, why are we talking about anything at all?
That's what I'm saying. Humanities exist to prevent life from becoming meaningless. Even if you are correct, even if life does have a higher meaning, I would say that becoming transhumanist, having technology ascend to the point where we can advance our brains to an unrecognizable extent, where we are no longer human, would dash the meaning that a god has placed in us.
Calm down, Nietzsche.
No, I agree.
I fundamentally disagree.
I know you do.
You haven't given it, if we just simply managed, if I can react faster to, say, Abby throwing a ball at me, which she'd never...
Which happens often.
Well, yeah, indeed. Because she's a nice person and doesn't harass people. I could more realistically block that ball, and in so doing, avoid suffering.
Now, my argument to this, the reason why I say don't mess with the brain at all, is because I don't wish to open the floodgates to allowing the types of augmentations that would lead to us becoming inhuman. But also there exists the fear in me, the very deep fear, that if you're able to react to something quickly, that may change the nature of how all prior humans saw things. And more on less like a humanitarian extent, like people 1,000 years ago couldn't comprehend our modern world because of the new sciences.
So what you're saying is that the limited perspective lends to a
The limited perspective makes us human.
So it lends to a richer humanitarian.
Not richer, it is the definition of humanity. Our constraints are what define us. And going beyond it is it's extinction.
But we're not arguing for omnipotence here.
No, I agree
appreciate that.
I agree with Sam. Humanity has constraints and there are boundaries. And at some point you have to ask, has science gone too far?
That's what I've asked already.
Yeah, and so that's where you apply your morals, your ethics, and you have to weigh that against it.
But
and
we're not discussing...
Often when scientists are often blind, you see this in movies and popular culture, scientists are blind to what they've created, and they just create for the sake of creating, and you need to have another person standing next to them saying, should you be doing this?
But going back to the point, that person who is standing next to them saying, should you be doing this, could only arise from quantitative analysis, which is why that is best for society.
No, it isn't. That person is an entire function of sort of humanitarian sort of principles.
No, but what I'm saying is their ability to go to a school and develop their thoughts only exists, as I said, through a timeline of the agricultural revolution, which is a great example of quantitative analysis arising, sedentary lifestyles, which allow people to develop.
But the reason sedentary lifestyles develop... okay, let's look at a sedentary life. Let's look at an advanced culture. Let's say Babylon. Babylon. Everybody knows Babylon, except for everybody else.
You mean real Babylon or your science fiction Babylon?
Wait,
real Babylon.
Okay,
I mean,
just
Jesus.
making
Wait,
sure.
is this new Babylon or old Babylon?
This is old
It's
Babylon,
not
right?
new, it's Neo.
It's
Yeah,
the Babylon with the blue stuff, dude.
The blue what are you
The
talking
blue
about?
stuff. The blue stuff.
No
man.
one knows what
No
you're
one
talking
knows what you're
about.
talking about.
There was a city called Babylon. It's irrelevant what its actual historical
Does it
nature
still
was.
exist?
No, okay,
It was
it's irrelevant. It's
No, the
irrelevant.
Hanging Gardens is supposedly...
There are a bunch of tossers who came along
That's
and
rude.
basically burned it down, ransacked it, etc. Why? Because they thought quantitatively.
Actually, the Akkadians
No,
were running
it is-
Babylonia because the Babylonians were busy celebrating a religious holiday, which is humanitarian, as well as the fact that the Akkadians went conquesting because their religion forbid them from ever losing a war.
It's
so
beside the
both
point.
sides of that argument are strictly humanitarian for the destruction
Okay,
of
my
that
question for
Excuse me,
Sam
can
before
I
this.
just- can I
Okay,
just-
go for
can I
it.
just
Go
finish
for
this?
it.
The Assyrians actually invaded.
Akkadians, not the
It was the
Assyrians.
Assyrians.
Yeah, it was the Assyrians.
Alright, the Assyrians.
Akkadians were gone. By
The
time.
Assyrians invaded. The Assyrians invaded because it was easier to make money out of beating the crap out of people than it was for sitting around and farming.
Are you questioning the
fact of the
religious?
matter.
Are you questioning the religious
The
zeal of
religious
the
thing-
soldiers?
The religiously of the soldiers doesn't enter into it. It's a
I would say
simple.
it does.
It's a simple mathematical equation.
Now, that is the path of least resistance, but I would say, as the Assyrian culture was
Why are you
dominated by
defending humanitarianism?
Look. When you look at the Assyrian society, they had a head priest. I would list religion as an aspect of humanity.
Was that the Assyrians or the Akkadians?
Well,
They were-
Akkadians are the first ones, and they're long gone.
Yeah, no, the people who thought that the world would end if they lost a battle were the Assyrians.
Yeah.
And their society was dominated by a head priest. And they were the ones that declared that Babylonia should be conquered. Otherwise, the world would end. They need more stuff
The
to
reason
conquer.
why their entire culture was built around that idea of war and conflict and violence,
Oh, shiz,
etc.,
you're right.
is
Yeah.
because of a fundamental economic decision. I would refer
It's tax based, right?
I would refer you, dear sir, to Das Kapital.
What is that? Oh, I know what
It's
that
the
is.
thing Karl
No,
Marx
I know.
wrote.
It's a...
But yeah, that's my piece. There you go.
Alright, well,
Abby, you can ask your question.
Well, actually, I think we're out of time, but thank you guys so much for coming in. Lots to think about here. Be sure to cast your vote in the poll attached, and be sure to tune in next week for a whole new debate. Thank you, guys.